Thanks for tuning in. I'm Daryl Henry with Bitner Henry Insurance Group. And today I'm very excited to have with me Nate Damaris of Rooted HR. Nate and I have known each other for a long time, going back probably about a decade. He and I worked together. He was the HR manager out at a mission sending organization, and then he moved on to working as in an HR capacity at a human service organization. Now he's got his own firm started. And so I'm very excited to have him here because I think he's got a wealth of knowledge about hiring and talent management with nonprofits and human service organizations. So I really want to get him to share a lot of thoughts on how you can manage talent within your organization, because it's something that I hear all the time. It's so hard to hire good people. It's hard to keep them. It's hard to develop them. It's hard to have a culture of safety and keeping people committed to the mission. So Nate's got hands-on experience with all of this, and I think it's going to be awesome for people that watch this video and listen to this.
Human services organizations have their own unique sets of challenges as it relates to staffing and everything that comes with that. So definitely looking forward to the conversation today, and hopefully you all will take away some nuggets that are helpful to you in the important work that you do in human services.
Yeah, so when you were at those organizations, walk me through, what were some of the things that were most challenging for you to deal with, both in terms of attracting talent and maintaining talent?
It's a really tight labor market in human services, and anybody in human services who's listening to this call is going to say, that's correct. It's really, really challenging with so much competition. It used to be that human services agencies would compete with each other for qualified top talent, and now really you're competing with everybody. So you're competing with Sheetz and with Walmart, and oftentimes those organizations, as for-profit companies, have the ability to increase their wages at an exponentially greater rate than what you can do in human services. At least in Pennsylvania, it's primarily based on reimbursement rates in the human services sector, and oftentimes those rates that we get reimbursed as the organization don't really keep track with inflation. And so you are very, very constrained when it comes to compensation of your staff. And so it really requires you to find other ways in which to differentiate yourselves as an organization that people want to work for. Compensation is important, and keeping track as much as you can is definitely essential. But looking at elements of culture and other ways in which you can really be different and be a place that people want to work at is super critical. So the human services organization that I worked for, I started just a couple of weeks after COVID hit. So really interesting time to be starting with any company, let alone a company that was focused on deploying people into situations where there was a high level of COVID risk, right? They had shut down a number of their facilities where they were not able to operate, and then everything else that had to remain operational. It became very challenging in that context to get staff to come to work, to want to come to work, to incentivize them to come to work in such challenging circumstances. And because of the political climate and the economic kind of influx of monies into people's pockets, it became also very difficult to attract new staff to fill the vacancies that already existed. So for probably the better part of 2 or 3 years post-COVID, it was very difficult to attract talent. That started to change over time as we really figured out how to differentiate ourselves and put ourselves out there as a provider that people wanted to work for. But as it relates to the mission organization, definitely a different demographic. The workforce that we had at the Human Services Organization was predominantly entry level, making $15, $16, $17 an hour. At the Mission Sending Organization, we were recruiting people from all over the world for pretty high-level positions as hospital directors and physicians. So kind of apples and oranges to compare the two. And certainly the level of position that you're hiring for can certainly make a difference in terms of the issues that you experience with your workforce and the challenges that you have, for sure. We had sort of a philosophy of when compensation is constrained, we're going to focus on culture. And culture can kind of be, sort of a nebulous, squishy thing. And it also doesn't have to be either. There's a lot of different ways in which that particular organization tried to differentiate itself. when we knew that the rates that we were offering were not as competitive as we had hoped they would be. Some of those things were pretty simple. For example, communication. Many organizations tend to hold the information tight, right? They don't necessarily share broadly what's happening across the organization, helping people on staff to develop a really good kind of big picture of here's how I fit in the bigger picture and mission of the organization. So communication was definitely something that we promoted. Professional development was something this particular agency did exceptionally well. Over the course of the last number of years in Pennsylvania, there's been an opportunity for incentivized compensation of providers for providers that really invest in their staff and create career pathing options. And so we dedicated a lot of time in terms of developing career pathway programs for direct support professionals, which really paid dividends. By and large, the folks who were engaging in those programs, which primarily included virtual online learning, also some testimonial work to demonstrate their understanding of what they were learning in those modules. By and large, those employees were ones that stuck with the organization versus their peers turning over. We had folks progressing through different levels of those career pathing options, and it also created opportunities for direct support professionals to be better prepared for higher level positions like supervisor opportunities. So, whether it was communication or professional development, or even things like helping come alongside of a resource constrained employees. So a lot of employees, because of the pay rates that we were able to offer, many of our employees, single parents, maybe had 2 or 3 jobs to help make ends meet. And so we knew that we had people coming to work that were struggling to meet their rent check. Maybe were facing eviction. Maybe just didn't have the money to repair their car to be able to get to work. And so a lot of what we did in the last couple of years was identify ways in which to come alongside of employees, be flexible with them in those situations where we knew that they were up against those resource constraints. And then also doing simple things like creating centralized repositories of state and community resources that people could avail themselves of as they encounter those different situations. Oftentimes when you're in a resource constraint, it's just overwhelming, right? You're just so focused on, I don't have the money, it's complicated, I don't have family, friends, a church network, whatever. And there's a ton of resources out there, but you're not even really sure where to look because you're so overwhelmed by the situation. So simple things like just creating those centralized repositories on our company intranet was super helpful. Supervisors would direct employees to that site. Employees would go themselves to that site. There were multiple employees that I sat down with and made phone calls to find a new place to live or resources to help overcome an eviction or those kinds of things. But we used to track retention of career pathway certified staff to see, was that having a direct impact on their retention with the organization? We had a very, very small percentage of people who certified at some level or with multiple certifications who moved on to another organization or out of the industry entirely. So we knew we were definitely having success by investing in our team and saying, we know there's a lot to learn about being a DSP. We know that many of you desire to know more, to learn more, to be more. And I think that definitely showed in our retention rates for those who were availing themselves of those certification opportunities. One of the things that we would do about 4 times a year is we would have a town hall with our employees in which the CEO and the executive team would be on a call. Any employee in the organization from DSP all the way up could join the call. It was kind of a state of affairs of, here's what's happening financially, operationally across the organization. Here's how we're doing from a staffing perspective. Here's what's happening coming down the pipeline, events, we're opening a new residential home, whatever it might be. And so it was partly informational, but it was also partly an opportunity for employees to ask any questions. And we did have employees that would pipe up in the meeting and just say, I have a question about whatever. They also had the opportunity to submit questions ahead of time so we could be prepared to address them, knowing that, it's like anything else. Somebody has a question, they're afraid to ask, but you know that most of the other people in the room have the same question but are also afraid to ask. So it really, I think, created a nice culture of sharing information to the extent that we could, and then engaging in that two-way conversation, where we got to kind of take a pulse on what were the things that were most concerning and important to the employees and be able to address their questions accordingly.
So, what went into setting up a career pathway, and what were you trying to teach people in that program?
So the majority of them were really related to enhancing the quality of care of our clients. So that could be anything from practical, basic medical concepts and practices, to incident reporting, to effective documentation practices. Really, any aspect of being a direct support professional that we felt where employees could benefit from additional education on a variety of topics that directly related to their jobs, but also would hopefully prepare them for future level opportunities. Most of it was virtual online learning. The nice thing about the programs that we put in place is that they all required some testimonial work. And so what that meant was they had to then apply the concepts that they were learning to real life situations that they had encountered as a DSP, or that if they didn't have a real life situation, they could come up with a situation they thought they might encounter and then apply the material. So it really wasn't just, hey, I'm going to sit and click through a bunch of PowerPoint slides. There was that aspect of it, but then on the tail end of it, it was, we want you to demonstrate what you're learning so that we really know that that you've kind of absorbed what you've learned in those modules.